The smell of frying oil and cheap cologne clung to my uniform as I balanced 3 plates along my forearm. Friday night at Lorenzo's meant full sections, aching feet, and customers who believed their 20% tip entitled them to treat me like less than human. I'd learned to wear a mask, a practiced smile that never reached my eyes, a rehearsed laugh that disguised the exhaustion weighing on my shoulders. Table 7 needs refills, Marco, the assistant manager, barked as he passed, not bothering to look at me. I nodded, though he couldn't see it, and delivered the pasta dishes to table 12 before grabbing the water pitcher. My fingers trembled slightly, betraying the 6 hours I'd already been on my feet. 3 more to go. Just 3 more hours and I could peel off this stained apron, count my meager tips, and crawl into bed alone again. That's when I heard them. 3 young men in expensive suits that couldn't hide their cheap characters, seated at table 7. They'd been difficult from the moment they walked in, demanding different tables twice, sending back drinks because they weren't strong enough, making comments just loud enough for me to hear, but too subtle to report. Finally, the one with gelled-back hair said as I approached. His eyes traveled up my body like he was appraising merchandise. "We were about to die of thirst over here." I forced my lips into that practiced smile. "I'm sorry for the wait. Would anyone like anything besides water?" "Depends," said another with a patchy beard and a signet ring that caught the dim restaurant lighting. "What else are you offering?" His friend snickered. I pretended not to understand, though heat crawled up my neck. "Our cocktail special tonight is the blood orange martini, or I can bring you a wine list." "Blood orange," the third one said, pulling out his phone. He had cold eyes, the kind that never warmed even when he smiled. "That matches your face right now." More laughter. I poured their water with unsteady hands, acutely aware of the phone now aimed in my direction. "Are you recording?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. "Just taking some pics of the menu." Cold eyes lied easily, but I could see my reflection in his phone screen. The camera focused on my face. "That's not against the law, is it?" I wanted to say something, to tell them to stop, but Marco was watching from the bar and I needed this job more than I needed dignity tonight. The rent was due next week and I was already $200 short. "I'll give you a few more minutes to decide," I managed, retreating to the kitchen, where I pressed my back against the cool tile wall and tried to steady my breathing. I hadn't told anyone at Lorenzo's about Elizio. Not because I was ashamed. How could I be ashamed of the man who had saved me in every way a person could be saved? But because the less people knew, the safer we both were. Our worlds were separate for a reason. Mine was this: greasy aprons, sore feet, and plastered-on smiles. His was dark cars with tinted windows, men who called him sir with fearful respect, and meetings that couldn't be discussed when he came home with tension knotted between his shoulder blades. I'd met Elizio 9 months ago when he came into the restaurant with his associates. I'd served their table, nervously aware of how they went quiet when I approached, how the other servers had suddenly found reasons to avoid their section, how Marco had pulled me aside beforehand and whispered, "Don't screw this up. These aren't regular customers." Elizio had barely looked at me that night, but I'd felt his presence like a physical weight in the room. When I'd accidentally spilled water on the table, grazing his expensive suit sleeve, I thought I might faint from terror, but he'd simply moved his arm, dabbed the water with his napkin, and continued his conversation. It wasn't until I was leaving that night, walking to the bus stop in the rain because I couldn't afford an Uber, that a black SUV had pulled alongside me. The window rolled down and there he was. "You'll catch pneumonia," he'd said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Get in." I should have refused. Every warning bell in my body had clanged at once. But something in his eyes, something unexpectedly gentle, had made me open that door. Now, 9 months later, I was his wife. Though nobody at Lorenzo's knew it. We'd married in a private ceremony after a whirlwind courtship that felt like being swept up in a beautiful, terrifying storm. Elizio had wanted me to quit my job immediately, but I'd insisted on keeping it. It was the one piece of independence I clung to, the one thing that was still mine in a life that had transformed so rapidly I sometimes didn't recognize it. "He has a thing for me, I swear," I overheard Patchy Beard say as I emerged from the kitchen, forcing myself back into character. Did you see how she looked at me? Dude, she probably has a thing for anyone who tips more than $5, Gelhair replied. These waitress types are all the same. I approached their table again, notepad ready. Have you decided what you'd like to order? Cold Eyes was still recording. I could see the red dot on his phone screen, partially hidden behind the menu he pretended to read. What's good here, sweetheart? Besides the view. His eyes lingered on my chest. The chicken parmesan is popular, I said flatly. I bet you're popular too, Patchy Beard said, reaching out to touch my arm. I stepped back instinctively. Please don't touch me, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. His face darkened. Excuse me? I was just being friendly. 3 chicken parmesans, Cold Eyes decided, finally lowering his phone. And bring us some bread. We've been waiting forever. I nodded and turned away, feeling their eyes burning into my back. When I returned with their bread basket, they fell silent, exchanging glances that made my skin crawl. Is there something on my face? I asked, unable to bear their stares any longer. Just wondering, Gelhair said. What someone like you does for fun when you're not waiting tables? I have a life outside work, like everyone else, I answered cautiously. A life, Cold Eyes repeated, smirking. With Netflix and your cats, I bet. More snickering. I didn't bother correcting them. Didn't mention that I spent my free time in a penthouse overlooking the city, learning to navigate Elysio's world of unspoken rules and dangerous subtleties. I didn't tell them that just last weekend, Elysia had flown me to Paris for dinner because I'd mentioned missing the crepes from my semester abroad. Your food will be ready soon, I said instead, turning away. As I walked to check on another table, I heard Cold Eyes say, Got enough for the video? This will be hilarious online. A chill ran through me. Were they posting videos of me mocking me publicly? The thought made me nauseous. But what could I do? Ask to see their phones? Call Marco over? He'd side with the customers. He always did, especially now when Lorenzo's was struggling to stay afloat, and every table counted. The rest of their meal passed in a blur of veiled insults and uncomfortable laughter. When I brought their check, Patchy Beard made a show of examining it closely. Seems high for what we got, he said. Service was mediocre at best. I bit my tongue, knowing that anything I said would only make it worse. They paid with a credit card, leaving a $5 tip on a $180 bill. As they stood to leave, Cold Eyes deliberately knocked his water glass over, sending ice cubes skittering across the table and water streaming onto my shoes. Oops, he said with false concern. Looks like you've got a mess to clean up. I watched them saunter out, laughing among themselves, phones still in hand. My hands shook as I mopped up the water, humiliation burning behind my eyes. I wanted to run after them, to demand they delete whatever they'd recorded. But what good would that do? I'd only give them more ammunition. It wasn't until closing time that I allowed myself to really feel the weight of the night. My back ached, my feet throbbed, and my pride lay in tatters. I counted my tips, $67 for 8 hours of degradation, and changed out of my uniform in the cramped employee bathroom. Outside, the October air bit through my thin jacket. I told Elysia I would take an Uber home tonight, but after the pathetic tips, I couldn't justify the expense. The bus would take nearly an hour, but it was only money I couldn't spare. I was halfway to the bus stop when the sleek black Bentley rolled silently alongside me. The window lowered, and Salvatore, Elysia's most trusted driver, looked at me with knowing eyes. Mrs. Vitali, he said respectfully. Mr. Vitali asked me to collect you. Of course, Elysia knew. He always knew where I was, what time I finished, when I might try to take the bus instead of the car he insisted on sending. I should have found it suffocating, this constant surveillance. Sometimes I did. But tonight, seeing Salvatore's familiar face after the humiliation of those 3 men, I felt only relief. I slid into the back seat, the warm leather embracing me like an old friend. Thank you, I said, leaning back and closing my eyes. Rough night? He asked, pulling smoothly away from the curb. Just tired, I replied, not wanting to burden him with the details. The city lights blurred outside the window as we drove toward the high-rise where Elizio and I lived. I thought about the three men, wondering what their lives were like. Did they go home to partners who loved them? Did they feel bigger by making others feel small? I would probably never see them again. Yet they'd left fingerprints on my sense of self that would take days to wipe clean. When we arrived at the building, the doorman nodded deferentially as I passed. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls, cheeks flushed from the cold, hair escaping its ponytail, eyes hollow with exhaustion. No one looking at me now would connect this woman with the poised, elegant wife who appeared on Elizio's arm at private functions. The duality of my existence sometimes felt like living two separate lives. The penthouse was dark when I entered, just the ambient city light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I slipped off my shoes, padding across the marble foyer toward the kitchen for a glass of water. That's when I felt it, the electric presence that always announced Elizio before I saw him. He sat in his leather chair by the window, the city sprawled out below like a carpet of stars in the dim light. His profile was sharp as a blade, his shoulders broad under his white shirt. He hadn't turned when I entered, but I knew he was acutely aware of my presence. "You're late," he said quietly, still looking out at the night. "The closing took longer than expected," I explained, moving toward him slowly. "I'm sorry I didn't text." Now he turned, his dark eyes finding mine across the room. Something in his expression made my heart stutter. There was anger there, carefully controlled but not directed at me. Something had happened, something beyond my delayed return. "Come here, Teresa," he said, his accent thickening as it always did when he was emotional. I went to him, drawn by the gravity he exerted. When I reached his chair, he pulled me onto his lap, one hand cradling my face with surprising gentleness. "Tell me about your night," he said, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. "It was just a normal shift," I said carefully. "Nothing special." His eyes, nearly black in the low light, studied mine. "No difficult customers? No one who made you uncomfortable?" My pulse quickened. How could he know? There are always difficult customers in restaurants. Elizio. It's part of the job. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "3 young men, table 7. They left you $5 on nearly $200. Cold dread pooled in my stomach. "How did you?" "That's not important." His hands slid to the nape of my neck, fingers threading through my hair. "What's important is what they did. What they said to you. I want to hear it from you, Teresa. All of it." I swallowed hard, trying to process what was happening. Elizio never discussed my work at Lorenzo's in detail. He knew I cherished that small independence, and though I sensed his disapproval, he had respected my wishes until now. "They were just rude customers," I said, attempting to downplay the situation. "It happens all the time." Elizio's fingers stilled against my neck, his expression unchanged, but his eyes darkening like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "Don't lie to me, Teresa. Not about this." The quiet command in his voice made me shiver. I'd seen glimpses of this Elizio before. The one other men feared, the one who controlled an empire from the shadows, but never directed at me. "They recorded me," I admitted finally, the words like ash in my mouth. "Made comments. Nothing I can't handle. Show me your phone." It wasn't a request. I hesitated, then reached for my purse on the side table. He took my phone, gently but firmly, unlocked it with the code he'd memorized despite never asking for it, and began scrolling. I watched his face, trying to understand what he was looking for. "What are you doing?" I asked, checking something. His thumbs moved deftly across the screen. A video was posted tonight, tagged with Lorenzo's location. My breath caught. A video of me? He found what he was searching for, his expression hardening into something I barely recognized. Without a word, he turned the phone so I could see the screen. It was me, filmed from table 7's vantage point. I was serving their water, my face flushed with embarrassment as they made comments just quiet enough that the microphone didn't catch them clearly. The caption read, "When the waitress thinks she's too good for a compliment, someone needs to be knocked down a peg." The comments underneath were worse. "Stuck up, probably expects $50 tips for that attitude. 5 feet 10 inches at best. Acting like she's a model. I know where this place is. Maybe I should visit and see if she'll serve me better." Nausea rose in my throat as I saw the view count. 12,543 and climbing. It had only been posted 3 hours ago. "Alizio?" I whispered, unable to formulate what I was feeling into words. He took the phone back, his movements controlled in a way that signaled danger more clearly than any outburst. "Who are they?" "I don't know. Just customers. Names. They paid with a credit card. Marco would know." I stopped, realizing what I was saying. "Alizio, please. It's just a stupid video. People will forget about it by tomorrow." His eyes met mine, and I saw something there that made my heart race. Not with fear for myself, but fear for what he might do. "No one speaks to my wife like that. No one films you without consent. No one humiliates you for entertainment." I placed my hand against his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath the crisp fabric of his shirt. "I'm fine. Really. You're not fine. I can see it in your eyes." He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "You should have called me." "And what? Have you show up at Lorenzo's with your men? Create a scene? I've worked hard to keep these parts of my life separate." A shadow crossed his face. "You're ashamed of me." "No," I said quickly, grabbing his hand. "Never that. I need something that's mine, something normal." "Being disrespected and exploited is normal?" His voice remained soft, but there was steel beneath the velvet. "Being recorded and mocked online is normal?" Tears pricked at my eyes. "That's not what I meant." He sighed, drawing me closer until my head rested against his shoulder. I breathed in his scent. Expensive cologne, a hint of whiskey, something uniquely him that always made me feel safe despite knowing exactly what he was capable of. "I've respected your wishes, Teresa. I've let you keep this job, even though it kills me to see you exhausted, to know you're serving others when you should be treated like a queen. I've stayed away, kept my worlds from colliding with yours." His lips brushed my temple. "But this I cannot ignore." A tear slipped down my cheek. "What are you going to do?" "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to, amore." He wiped away my tear with his thumb. "Just know that no one who disrespects you will ever do so again." His words should have frightened me. 9 months ago they would have. But I'd learned that Alizio's moral code, while different from what society deemed acceptable, was unbreakable in its own way. His loyalty, once given, was absolute. His protection all-encompassing. "They don't know who I am," I said quietly. "Who you are. They're just entitled jerks who thought it would be fun to mock the waitress." "That's their mistake," he replied simply. "One they'll regret." I wanted to argue further, to make him understand that this kind of retaliation would only blur the boundaries I'd worked so hard to maintain. But exhaustion swept over me suddenly, the weight of the night's humiliation compounding with the physical toll of my shift. Alizio sensed the change immediately. Without another word, he stood, lifting me effortlessly in his arms. He carried me to our bedroom, setting me gently on the edge of the vast bed before kneeling to remove my socks. "You don't have to do that," I murmured, embarrassed at being cared for like a child. "Your feet are swollen," he observed, his thumbs pressing gently against my arches. "You were on them for too long." I winced as he found a particularly tender spot. "Occupational hazard." His eyes flicked up to mine. "One you won't have to endure much longer." I tensed. "Alizio, we agreed. That was before I saw you being treated like this." He rose, moving to the bathroom where I heard water running. "Come, a bath will help." Too tired to argue, I followed him into the marble bathroom where he'd filled the massive tub with steaming water and bath oils that smelled of lavender and jasmine. In any other circumstance, I might have been moved by his tenderness, but I couldn't shake the cold certainty that somewhere in the city, 3 young men had no idea what was coming for them. "Alizio," I tried one more time as he helped me undress. Promise me you won't do anything extreme. His eyes traveled over my body, not with the leering hunger of the men at table 7, but with a reverence that still made me blush after all these months. Define extreme. You know what I mean. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I promise they will suffer no permanent physical harm. Will that satisfy you? It wasn't the promise I wanted, but it was the most I would get. I nodded, stepping into the bath and sinking into its fragrant warmth. Alizio rolled up his sleeves, knelt beside the tub, and began washing my hair, his strong fingers massaging my scalp until I felt myself melting under his touch. Why do you still do it? He asked softly. Work there when you don't need to. I closed my eyes, considering my answer carefully. Because before you, it was all I had. My independence, my ability to take care of myself, even if it was just barely. And now it's a reminder that I'm still me, that I haven't disappeared into your world completely. His hands paused for a moment. Do you feel trapped here with me? I opened my eyes to find him watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. No, I feel transformed. Sometimes it's overwhelming how quickly everything changed. Do you regret it? The question hung between us, weighted with a vulnerability I rarely glimpsed in him. Never, I said firmly, reaching up to touch his face. I love you, Alizio. I just need to hold on to pieces of who I was before you so I don't lose myself entirely. Something in his expression softened. I would never want you to lose yourself, your spirit, your independence. These are what drew me to you that night in the rain. The memory washed over me, standing at the bus stop, soaked and miserable, then seeing his window roll down. The choice I'd made that had altered the course of my life forever. I know, I whispered. He helped me finish bathing, then wrapped me in a plush towel, carrying me back to bed where he dried my hair with gentle hands. When he finally lay beside me, pulling me against his chest, I was nearly asleep. Rest now, he murmured against my hair. Tomorrow will be a new day. The promise in his words followed me into my dreams. I woke to an empty bed and the sound of quiet voices from the living room. Sunlight streamed through the windows, which we'd forgotten to close the curtains on, and for a moment, I simply lay there, letting the warmth bathe my skin. The digital clock on the nightstand read 10:17 a.m. I never slept this late, even on my days off, wrapping myself in Alizio's silk robe. I padded toward the voices, stopping when I recognized Dante's deep rumble. Dante was Alizio's consigliere, his most trusted advisor and the only one of his associates who had been at our wedding. If he was here on a Saturday morning, something significant was happening. It's been handled, I heard Dante say. The video has been removed from all platforms. No traces remain. And the three of them, Alizio's voice was calm, controlled, identified and located. Salvatore is tracking their movements now. We have addresses for all three. They'll be brought in tonight. My blood ran cold. Brought in. The euphemism hung in the air like a storm cloud. Good. I want to handle this personally. Alizio's tone left no room for argument. What did you find on them? Papers rustled. Jason Miller, 26, works at his father's investment firm. Lives in a high-rise downtown. Trust fund kid with a history of complaints from service workers, though nothing ever sticks because daddy's lawyers clean up his messes. Cold Eyes, I thought, the one who had been filming. Tyler Reynolds, 25, aspiring real estate broker. 3 DUIs in the past 2 years, charges reduced each time, currently on probation though he doesn't seem to take it seriously. Gel hair. And Michael Donnelly, 27, works with Miller at the investment firm. 2 restraining orders from ex-girlfriends. Seems to have anger management issues. Patchy beard. The one who had touched my arm. Their fathers? Alizio asked. Miller Sr. is well connected, but not in our circles. Old money, political aspirations. Reynolds's father owns a chain of car dealerships. Middle management at best. Donnelly comes from less. The lingering scent of frying oil, a cheap cologne clinging stubbornly, still permeated the fibers of my uniform. Another Friday night at Lorenzo's had come and gone, leaving in its wake the familiar sting of aching feet and the residue of interactions with customers who seemed to believe their paltry 20% tip gave them license to treat me as someone less than human. Years of this had taught me to don a kind of mask, a carefully crafted smile that never quite reached my eyes, a practiced laugh that served to conceal the exhaustion that felt like a lead weight on my shoulders. Table 7 needs refills. Marco, the ever-present, rarely helpful assistant manager, barked in my direction as he hurried past, not even sparing me a glance. I gave a quick nod, though he couldn't see it, and finished delivering the last of the pasta dishes to table 12 before finally grabbing the water pitcher. I noticed my fingers trembled almost imperceptibly, a subtle betrayal that spoke volumes about the 6 hours I'd already spent relentlessly on my feet. Only 3 more to go. Just 3 more grueling hours, and I'd be able to peel off the stained, unforgiving apron, count my less than impressive tips, and gratefully crawl into bed, alone yet again. And that's precisely when I heard them, those voices cutting through the general din of the restaurant. 3 young men, impeccably dressed in expensive suits that somehow failed to conceal the cheapness of their characters, occupied table 7. Right from the moment they had swaggered in, they had been nothing short of difficult, twice demanding different tables and sending back drinks because they weren't, apparently, strong enough. They made a constant stream of snide comments, always just loud enough for me to overhear, yet carefully calibrated to remain too subtle for me to officially report. Finally, as I approached their table, the one with the meticulously gelled-back hair, his eyes raking over my body with the same detached appraisal one might use when examining merchandise, drawled, "We were starting to think we'd die of thirst over here." I forced my lips into that practiced, entirely insincere smile. "I sincerely apologize for the wait. Would anyone care for something other than water?" "Depends," the second one replied, sporting a patchy excuse for a beard and an ostentatious signet ring that glinted in the restaurant's subdued lighting. "What else are you offering, darlin'?" His friend chuckled, a low, unpleasant sound. I pretended to miss the insinuation completely, though a wave of heat crept steadily up my neck. "Our cocktail special this evening is a blood orange martini. Or, if you prefer, I could certainly bring you a wine list." "Blood orange?" the third one chimed in, pulling out his phone as if on cue. He possessed the kind of cold eyes that never seemed to warm, not even when he smiled, which was rare. "How fitting, that matches your face perfectly right now." More laughter filled the air, grating against my nerves. With hands that were now noticeably unsteady, I began to pour their water, acutely aware of the phone that was now deliberately aimed in my direction. "Are you recording me?" I asked, my voice coming out far smaller and more hesitant than I had intended. "Just snapping a few pictures of the menu," Cold Eyes replied, the lie rolling smoothly off his tongue. But I caught my reflection in his phone screen, a distorted image that confirmed my suspicions. The camera was focused directly on my face. "It's not against the law to take pictures, is it?" I wanted to say something, to find the words to tell them to stop, to demand some basic level of respect. But Marco, the ever-watchful manager, was observing me from his post at the bar. I needed this job more than I needed pride tonight. Rent was due the following week, and I was already staring down a $200 shortfall. "I'll give you a few more moments to decide," I managed to say, my voice trembling slightly, before retreating to the relative sanctuary of the kitchen. I leaned back against the cool, mercifully smooth tile wall, fighting to regain my composure and steady my breathing. I hadn't shared the details of Eliseo with anyone at Lorenzo's. Not out of shame, certainly not. How could I ever feel ashamed of the man who had saved me in more ways than anyone could imagine? My silence stemmed from a deep-seated instinct. The fewer people who knew, the safer we both would be. Our worlds were deliberately separate for a very specific reason. Mine consisted of greasy aprons, perpetually sore feet, and the forced plastic smiles I wore each night. His was a world of sleek, dark cars with tinted windows, of men who addressed him with fearful deference, of meetings that could never be discussed when he came home, the tension a palpable knot between his shoulder blades. I had first met Eliseo 9 months earlier, when he had come into the restaurant accompanied by his associates. I had been assigned to serve their table, acutely aware of the sudden hush that fell whenever I approached and the way the other servers had abruptly found urgent reasons to avoid their section. I remembered Marco pulling me aside beforehand and whispering, "Don't you dare screw this up. These aren't your everyday customers." Alizio himself had barely glanced at me that night, but I had felt his presence, a palpable weight in the room. When I had clumsily spilled water on the table, the droplets grazing the sleeve of his impeccably tailored suit, I had nearly fainted from sheer terror. But he had simply moved his arm slightly, dabbed at the water with his napkin, and continued his conversation without missing a beat. It wasn't until I was leaving that night, trudging toward the bus stop in the pouring rain because I couldn't justify the expense of an Uber, that a black SUV had pulled up silently beside me. The window had glided down, and there he was, Alizio. "You'll catch pneumonia," he had said, his voice as smooth and intoxicating as aged whiskey. "Get in the car." I should have flatly refused his offer. Every warning signal in my body had been blaring at full volume, screaming at me to run. But there was something in his eyes, something unexpectedly gentle and disarming, that had compelled me to reach out and open that door. Now, 9 months later, I was his wife. Although no one at Lorenzo's knew it, we had been married in a small, private ceremony, the culmination of a whirlwind courtship that had felt like being swept away by a storm, both beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Alizio had wanted me to quit my job immediately, but I had stubbornly insisted on remaining. It was the only shred of independence I clung to, the one remaining piece of my old life in a world that had been transformed so profoundly, so quickly, that I barely recognized it anymore. "He definitely has a thing for me. I swear it," I overheard Patchy Beard say as I emerged from the kitchen, forcing myself to slip back into my serving persona. "Did you see the way she was looking at me? Dude, she probably has a thing for anyone who tips more than $5. Gel Hair scoffed in response. "These waitress types are all the same." I forced myself to approach their table once again, my notepad poised. "Have you all had an opportunity to decide what you would like to order this evening?" Cold Eyes was still actively recording. I could see the telltale red dot glowing on his phone screen, partially obscured by the menu he was pretending to peruse. "So, what's good here, sweetheart? Besides the obvious view, of course." His gaze lingered suggestively on my chest. "The chicken parmesan is consistently popular," I replied, my voice deliberately flat and devoid of any inflection. "I bet you're pretty popular too," Patchy Beard said, reaching out to touch my arm. I recoiled instinctively, taking a step backward. "Please don't touch me," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. His face darkened, his jovial demeanor vanishing instantly. "Excuse me? I was just being friendly." "We'll take 3 chicken parmesans," Cold Eyes declared, finally lowering his phone. "And bring us some bread, for God's sake. We've been waiting for ages." I nodded stiffly and turned away, the weight of their combined stares burning into my back. When I returned a few moments later with their bread basket, they fell silent, exchanging furtive glances that made my skin crawl with unease. "Is there something on my face?" I asked, unable to endure their unsettling scrutiny any longer. "Just wondering," Gel Hair said, a smirk playing on his lips. "What someone like you actually does for fun when you're not slinging plates around here?" "I have a life outside of work, just like anyone else," I answered cautiously, carefully choosing my words. "A life," Cold Eyes repeated, his smirk widening. "I bet it involves a lot of Netflix and snuggling with your cats." More snickering erupted around the table. I didn't bother to correct them. I didn't mention that I spent my free time in a luxurious penthouse overlooking the glittering cityscape, navigating Alizio's intricate world of unspoken rules and unspoken dangers. I didn't tell them that just last weekend, Alizio had chartered a private jet to fly me to Paris for dinner because I had mentioned missing the crepes from a small cafe I had frequented during my semester abroad. "Your food will be ready shortly," I said instead, and with a curt nod, I turned and walked away. As I moved to check on another table, I distinctly heard Cold Eyes say, "Did we get enough footage for the video?" This is going to be absolutely hilarious online. A sudden chill ran through me, a wave of anxiety that washed over me in a rush. Were they actually posting videos of me, ridiculing me for the amusement of strangers? The very thought made me feel nauseous and exposed. What could I possibly do? Demand to see their phones? Call Marco over and lodge a complaint? I knew deep down that he would almost certainly side with the paying customers. He always did, especially now, with Lorenzo's teetering on the brink of financial ruin, and every single table was crucial to keeping the place afloat. The remainder of their meal unfolded in a torturous blur of thinly veiled insults and forced, uncomfortable laughter. When I presented their check, Patchy Beard made a great show of scrutinizing it with exaggerated care. "This seems a little steep for what we actually got," he said, his tone accusatory. "And the service was, shall we say, mediocre at best." I bit down hard on my tongue, resisting the urge to defend myself. I knew from long experience that anything I said would only escalate the situation and make it even worse. They paid the bill with a credit card, leaving a measly $5 tip on a bill that totaled $180. As they stood to leave, Cold Eyes deliberately knocked his water glass over, sending ice cubes scattering across the table and a stream of water cascading down onto my shoes. "Oops," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Looks like you've got a bit of a mess to clean up there." I watched them saunter out of the restaurant, still laughing amongst themselves, their phones clutched firmly in their hands. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the damp cloth as I began to mop up the spilled water, the sting of humiliation burning fiercely behind my eyes. I wanted to chase after them, to demand that they delete whatever they had recorded, to reclaim some small measure of my dignity. But what good would it do? I would only be providing them with more ammunition, more material to use against me. It wasn't until closing time, after the last customers had finally departed, that I allowed myself to truly feel the crushing weight of the evening. My back ached relentlessly, my feet throbbed with a dull, persistent pain, and my pride lay in tatters. I counted my meager tips, a pathetic $67 for 8 grueling hours of near-constant degradation. I changed out of my stained uniform in the cramped, depressing employee bathroom, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Outside, the sharp October air cut through my thin jacket, sending a shiver down my spine. I had told Elizio that I would take an Uber home tonight, but after receiving such paltry tips, I couldn't justify the extravagance. The bus would take nearly an hour, but it was an expense I simply couldn't afford to ignore. I had walked about halfway to the bus stop when the sleek, black Bentley rolled silently to a stop beside me. The window glided down and Salvatore, Elizio's most trusted driver and confidant, looked at me with knowing, sympathetic eyes. "Mrs. Vitali," he said respectfully, his tone carefully neutral. "Mr. Vitali asked me to come and collect you." Of course, Elizio knew. He always knew where I was, what time my shift ended. Father was a cop, now retired. Mother's a teacher. Elizio was silent for a moment. The cop connection could be problematic. Retired 5 years ago. Bad terms. Drinking problem. No loyalty there to worry about. Financial vulnerabilities. Miller has everything handed to him. Reynolds is in debt. Gambling mostly. Donnelly lives beyond his means, trying to keep up with his wealthier friends. I'd heard enough. I stepped into the living room and both men turned immediately. Dante straightened from where he'd been leaning over a laptop, nodding respectfully. "Mrs. Vital." "Teresa," Elizio said, his expression softening as he took me in. "You should be resting." "I've rested enough." I tightened the robe around me, aware of my exposed legs and still damp hair. "What are you planning, Elizio?" Dante glanced between us, then gathered his papers. "I'll wait downstairs." When the door closed behind him, Elizio approached me slowly, as if I were a wild animal. He didn't want to startle me. "You heard?" It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Then you know I'm taking care of it. The video is gone. Those men will never bother you again." "Brought in," I quoted. "What does that mean exactly?" His jaw tightened. "It means they will learn a lesson about respect." By terrifying them, hurting them? Would you prefer I do nothing? A dangerous edge crept into his voice. Let them continue posting videos? Let other men see it and think they can treat you the same way? I crossed my arms over my chest, torn between the part of me that was horrified at what Eliseo might do and the smaller, darker part that wanted those men to pay for their cruelty. There has to be a middle ground, I said finally. Something that doesn't involve. I trailed off, unable to articulate what I feared. Eliseo's expression remained impassive. But I'd learned to read the subtle tells that betrayed his emotions, the slight tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible flex of his jaw. "What would you have me do, Teresa?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft. "Call the police? File a harassment complaint that will go nowhere? These men believe they can treat others as playthings for their amusement without consequences." "I don't know," I admitted, "but this bringing them in, whatever that means, it feels extreme." He moved closer, his fingers grazing my cheek with a gentleness that contradicted the steel in his eyes. "You didn't see what I saw in that video. The comments beneath it, the way they looked at you. I lived it, Eliseo. I was there. Then you know they deserve whatever comes to them." I pulled away from his touch, frustration building inside me. "This is exactly why I wanted to keep my job separate from your world. The moment they intersect, everything becomes this." I gestured between us. "Suddenly, I'm not just Teresa who waits tables. I'm Mrs. Vital, and anyone who crosses me faces your wrath." Something flashed in his eyes. Hurt perhaps, or anger. "You are Mrs. Vital, my wife. The most precious person in my life. Did you think that was just a title? That I would stand by while you're humiliated? Of course not. But there's a difference between protecting me and whatever you're planning with Dante." Eliseo ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare display of agitation. "Those men chose to target someone they thought was powerless. They believed there would be no repercussions for their actions. They were wrong." I knew that look in his eyes, the quiet determination that brooked no argument. 9 months wasn't long enough to know all of Eliseo's secrets, to understand fully what his business entailed. But it was long enough to know that once his mind was set, nothing would change it. "Will you at least tell me what you're going to do?" I asked, my voice small. He studied me for a long moment. "Would knowing the details make you feel better or worse?" The question hung between us, and I realized he was right. I didn't want to know. Not really. Like so many aspects of Eliseo's life, I preferred the comfort of partial ignorance. "Just promise me no one dies because of a stupid video," I said finally. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I already promised no permanent physical harm. I am a man of my word, Teresa." The way he specified physical harm didn't escape my notice, but I let it go. There was a boundary in our relationship, a line I rarely crossed when it came to his business dealings. It was part of our unspoken agreement. He kept that world away from me, and I didn't ask questions I didn't want answers to. "I need to go into work today," I said, changing the subject. "My shift starts at noon." Eliseo's expression hardened. "No, excuse me. You're not going back to Lorenzo's. Not today. Not ever." I stared at him, disbelief turning quickly to anger. "You can't just decide that for me. And I have." His tone was final. "Those men know where you work. The video may be gone, but who knows how many people saw it before it was taken down. I won't risk your safety." "My safety?" I laughed without humor. "They're obnoxious jerks, Eliseo. Not murderers. You'd be surprised how quickly one becomes the other." He took my hands in his touch surprisingly gentle considering the tension radiating from him. "Teresa, please, for once, let me protect you without fighting me on it. By forcing me to quit my job, the one thing I've asked to keep for myself." His eyes searched mine. "Is it worth this? Being mocked, filmed, degraded, working until your feet swell and your back aches for what? Tips that don't even cover your bus fare home?" "It's not about the money," I said, pulling my hands away. "It's about having something that's just mine. Something normal." Normal. He practically spat the word. You think those men treated you normally? You think Marco, who works you to exhaustion and sides with abusive customers, is giving you a normal experience? I flinched at the truth in his words. It's not always like that, is it? Alizio's voice softened. How many times have you come home with stories of customers who made inappropriate comments? How many times have you worked double shifts because Marco knows you won't say no? This job isn't your independence, Teresa. It's your cage. His words struck a nerve I hadn't realized was exposed. How many nights had I dragged myself home? Feet throbbing, back aching, dignity in tatters. How many times had I swallowed my pride when customers treated me as less than human? But still, the thought of giving it up, of surrendering this last tie to the woman I was before Alizio, filled me with an inexplicable panic. I need to shower, I said abruptly, turning away from him. I'll be late. I felt his eyes on me as I retreated to the bathroom, closing the door between us with a quiet finality. Under the hot spray of water, I let the tears come. Tears of frustration, confusion, and a strange grief for a life I was outgrowing but couldn't seem to let go of. By the time I emerged, dressed in my wrinkled uniform from the night before, Alizio was gone. A note on the kitchen counter simply read, "Car waiting downstairs. We'll talk tonight." I crumpled the note, equal parts relieved and disappointed that he hadn't stayed to continue our argument. Outside, as promised, the Bentley idled at the curb, Salvatore standing at attention beside it. "Mrs. Vital," he greeted me, opening the door. "Just Teresa at work, remember?" I reminded him as I slid into the leather interior. Salvatore's expression remained impassive as he closed the door. A moment later, he was behind the wheel, pulling smoothly into traffic. "Lorenzo's?" he asked, his eyes finding mine in the rearview mirror. I hesitated, thinking of Alizio's words, the cage I couldn't seem to recognize. "Yes," I said finally. "Please." The drive was silent, tension thick in the air. I knew Salvatore reported everything to Alizio, where he took me, what time he dropped me off, whether I looked upset or tired. It was part of the invisible network of surveillance that surrounded me, one I pretended not to notice most days. As we approached Lorenzo's, I felt a strange tightening in my chest. The restaurant looked different somehow, smaller and shabbier than I remembered. Or perhaps I was the one who had changed, seeing it now through Alizio's eyes. "I'll wait," Salvatore said as he pulled to the curb. "That's not necessary. My shift ends at 8. His expression didn't change. Mr. Vitali's instructions were clear. "I'll be here." I knew better than to argue. With a sigh, I gathered my purse and stepped out of the car, feeling Salvatore's eyes on me until I pushed through Lorenzo's doors. The familiar smell of garlic and tomato sauce greeted me, along with Marco's perpetual scowl. "You're late," he barked, though a glance at the clock showed I was actually 5 minutes early. "Sorry," I said automatically, heading to the employee room to stow my purse. "Hey, wait," Marco called, following me. "I need to talk to you about last night." I tensed, turning slowly to face him. "What about last night?" Marco shifted uncomfortably, his usual bravado diminished. "Those guys at table 7, they didn't bother you too much, did they?" The question was so unexpected that I simply stared at him. "Since when do you care if customers bother me?" He ran a hand over his balding head. "Look, I heard they posted something online, a video." So he knew. "Yes, they did. It's gone now," he said quickly. "I checked this morning after I got a call." My pulse quickened. "A call from who?" Marco avoided my eyes. "Doesn't matter. Just some guy saying the video had been taken down and that those 3 wouldn't be coming back to Lorenzo's. Ever." He paused, studying me with newfound weariness. "Teresa, is there something you want to tell me?" I kept my expression neutral. "Like what? Like who you really are? Who your husband is?" I shot through my veins. "I don't know what you're talking about." Marco gave a humorless laugh. "Come on, I'm not stupid. The way you showed up 9 months ago looking for any job. No experience but desperate to work. The black car that picks you up sometimes. The way you never talk about your life outside of here. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. The call I got this morning wasn't just about a video. It was a warning about how I've been treating the wife of Eliseo Vital. Hearing Eliseo's name in this context, in Lorenzo's dingy break room, from Marco's mouth, felt like worlds colliding. I don't. Save it, Marco interrupted, raising his hands in surrender. I don't want to know details. I just want to know why. Why work here dealing with guys like those last night when you're married to? He trailed off, clearly afraid to even speak Eliseo's name again. I sank onto the bench, suddenly exhausted. Because it's normal, I said simply. Or it was supposed to be. Marco stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Normal? You think waiting tables in this dump is normal when you could be doing whatever it is his wife does? I wanted something that was just mine. Something that connected me to who I was before. The truth of it hit me with unexpected force. But it's not working anymore, is it? No. Marco agreed. A new respect in his voice. It's not. And after last night, I'm thinking you shouldn't come back. For everyone's safety. There it was. The decision made for me. Part of me wanted to argue, to insist that I could separate these worlds if I just tried harder. But Marco's fear-tinged expression told me everything I needed to know. The barrier between my two lives had already crumbled. I'll finish my shift today, I said quietly. Marco shook his head. No need. I'll pay you for the day, but... He glanced nervously toward the front of the restaurant. There's a guy in a suit who's been sitting at the bar since we opened. Hasn't ordered anything but water. Keeps watching the door. One of Eliseo's men, no doubt. Watching, protecting, reminding Marco exactly who I belong to. I understand, I said, rising to my feet. I removed my apron and name tag, placing them on the bench with a finality that ached in my chest. I'll go. Marco nodded, relief evident in his posture. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about those guys last night. If I'd known who you were, they would have treated me differently. That's exactly why I never told you. I finished for him. I gathered my purse and walked out of Lorenzo's for the last time. The weight of my decision settling over me like a shroud. Outside, Salvatore stood beside the Bentley, appearing unsurprised to see me so soon. Home, Mrs. Vital? He asked, opening the door. I paused, looking back at the restaurant, at the life I was leaving behind. No, I decided suddenly. Take me to Eliseo. Something like approval flashed in Salvatore's eyes. He's at the club, preparing for tonight. The club was Eliseo's legitimate business. A high-end establishment where the wealthy and powerful came to see and be seen. It was also, I suspected, where much of his not-so-legitimate business was conducted in private rooms upstairs. Then that's where I want to go, I said, sliding into the back seat. It's time I stopped pretending I could live in two worlds. The Ivory Room occupied the entire top floor of a historic building downtown. Its entrance marked only by a discreet brass plaque and a suited doorman who knew exactly who to admit and who to turn away. As Salvatore pulled up to the curb, I felt a flutter of nervousness in my stomach. I'd been here before, of course, at Eliseo's side for private dinners or special events, but never alone. Never during the day when the club was closed to patrons. The doorman recognized me immediately, nodding deferentially as he opened the heavy door. Mrs. Vital, Mr. Vital is in his office. Inside, the club was transformed by daylight without the evening's dim lighting and soft music. The space felt larger, its elegance more apparent in the polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers that now sparkled in the afternoon sun, filtering through tall windows. A skeleton crew of staff moved about, preparing for the evening, each pausing to acknowledge me with a respectful nod or murmured greeting. I made my way to the private elevator at the back, the one that led directly to Eliseo's office and the rooms above where his most sensitive meetings took place. The elevator required a key card, which I extracted from my purse, a symbol of trust Eliseo had given me early in our marriage, though I rarely used it. As the elevator ascended, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. I still wore my Lorenzo's uniform, black pants, and a white button-down shirt with the restaurant's logo embroidered on the chest. My hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, my face bare of makeup. I looked nothing like the woman who usually accompanied Elizio to this place, draped in designer dresses and carefully applied cosmetics. Yet, for the first time, I felt more authentic in this moment than I had in months of straddling two worlds. The elevator doors slid open silently, revealing a plush hallway with only two doors. One to Elizio's office, the other to a private suite I'd never entered. From behind the office door, I could hear the low murmur of voices. I hesitated, suddenly unsure of my decision to come here, to insert myself into this aspect of Elizio's life I'd always kept at arm's length. Before I could second-guess myself further, the office door opened and Dante emerged, his expression shifting from surprise to careful neutrality when he saw me. "Mrs. Vital," he greeted me, stepping aside. "Elizio is inside." I nodded my thanks, moving past him into the office where Elizio stood behind a massive desk of dark wood, his back to the door as he gazed out of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He wore a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, his dark hair neatly combed, every inch the powerful man others feared and respected. "I told you we'd have everything ready by tonight," he said without turning, clearly thinking I was Dante returning. "The arrangements are all ready." He stopped as he turned and saw me, surprise flickering across his features before his expression softened. "Teresa, I quit Lorenzo's," I said simply, the words hanging in the air between us. Elizio studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "I see. You were right," I continued, moving further into the room. "It wasn't independence. It was a cage I couldn't recognize." He remained still, watching me approach with an intensity that might have frightened me once. "What changed your mind?" "Marco knew who I was, who you are." I stopped at the edge of his desk. "Someone called him this morning about the video, about me being your wife." A muscle ticked in Elizio's jaw. "I see. Was it you?" I asked. "Did you call him?" "No." He circled the desk slowly, coming to stand before me. "But I won't pretend to be sorry it happened. I believed him. Elizio never lied to me, even when the truth was difficult. It was one of the foundations of our relationship. His unwavering honesty, even as he kept certain details of his business shielded from me." "There was a man watching the restaurant," I said. "One of yours, Franco." Elizio nodded. "For your protection." "He scared Marco enough that he basically fired me." I gave a humorless laugh. "Paid me for the day and suggested I not come back, for everyone's safety." Elizio's expression remained impassive, but I caught the satisfaction in his eyes. Marco finally showed good judgment. "You knew this would happen," I accused, though without real anger. "The moment those men posted that video, you knew my time at Lorenzo's was over." "I knew it was inevitable," he corrected, reaching to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "Though I expected more resistance from you." I leaned into his touch, surprised by the relief flooding through me. "I'm tired of pretending, Elizio, tired of being two different people." Something like triumph flashed in his eyes. "And who are you now, Teresa? Which version is real?" It was a question I'd been asking myself since I walked out of Lorenzo's. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I want to find out without hiding behind a job that makes me miserable just because it feels safe and familiar." Elizio cupped my face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the power I knew resided in those fingers. "I never wanted to take anything from you, Amoro, only to give you everything you deserve." "I know." I covered his hands with mine. "But there's something I need to ask you." His expression grew guarded. "What is that?" "Those men, the ones from last night." I swallowed hard. "What are you planning to do with them?" Elizio's hands dropped from my face, his posture straightening as he took a small step back. The subtle shift was like watching a door close. The loving husband receded, the dangerous businessman emerging. "You said you didn't want details," he reminded me. "I've changed my mind." I stood my ground. "If I'm truly accepting this life, accepting all of you, then I need to understand what that means. What you do to people who cross you, who cross me." He studied me, weighing my words, perhaps measuring my ability to handle the truth. They'll be brought to the warehouse tonight, each one separately, so they don't draw courage from each other's presence. And then they'll learn what happens when they target someone under my protection. His voice was cool, detached. First, they'll learn who you really are, who I am. The error in judgment they made when they chose to mock and film my wife. I suppressed a shiver. And after that lesson, it depends on their response. If they show proper remorse, they'll be given a chance to make amends. Amends? How? A smile touched Elisio's lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. Financial contributions to causes benefiting service workers, substantial ones, along with public apologies posted to the same platforms where they shared their video. It wasn't what I'd expected, and if they refuse, then the lesson becomes more visceral. His expression hardened. But still within the parameters I promised you. No permanent physical harm. I tried to imagine it. These three arrogant young men confronted with the reality of who they'd chosen to target. Faced with Elisio's quiet menace and the knowledge of their own terrible mistake. Part of me recoiled at the thought, but another part, a darker part one rarely acknowledged, felt a thrill of satisfaction. I want to be there, I said, the words surprising me as much as they clearly surprised Elisio. Absolutely not. His response was immediate, brooking no argument. Why? I challenged. If I'm truly your wife, if I'm accepting this life, why shouldn't I witness what happens to those who wrong me? Elisio's eyes darkened. Because I protect you from the ugliness of my world. Teresa, that was our agreement from the beginning. An agreement I'm questioning now. I moved closer to him, emboldened by the realization that I was changing, evolving into someone new. Someone who was neither the desperate waitress nor the elegant, shielded wife, but something altogether different. I've spent 9 months with one foot in each world. Elisio, it's not working anymore. If I'm stepping fully into yours, I need to understand what that means. You think you want this, he said quietly. But seeing men broken, even men who deserve it, changes you. It marks you. I don't want that for you. I'm already changed, I whispered. The moment I got into your car that night in the rain, everything changed. I've just been fighting it, holding on to scraps of my old life because I was afraid of disappearing into yours. Something shifted in Elisio's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. And now you're not afraid? I'm terrified, I admitted. But I'm more afraid of living halfway between worlds, belonging to neither. He considered me for a long moment, his gaze searching. You truly want to witness this? I need to see what happens when someone hurts me in your world. I need to understand the consequences. Elisio ran a hand through his hair, a rare display of indecision. There are parts of my business you should never see, Teresa. Lines I never want you to cross. I'm not asking to be involved in your business, I clarified. Just this. Just tonight. He was silent for so long I thought he would refuse. Finally, he nodded, a single, sharp movement. On one condition. You stay with me at all times. You speak only when I indicate you may. And if at any point I tell you to leave, you do so without question. It wasn't really one condition. More like a set of non-negotiable terms laid out with the same unflinching resolve he brought to every aspect of his life. My father had been a cop, now enjoying his retirement. My mother, a schoolteacher, dedicated to shaping young minds. Elisio paused for a beat. The fact that my dad was a former cop could throw a wrench into things. He'd been retired for 5 years, and the circumstances surrounding his departure weren't exactly pretty. Rumor had it he'd developed a drinking problem, so loyalty wouldn't be an issue. Then there were the potential financial vulnerabilities. Miller, for instance, had been born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Reynolds, on the other hand, was drowning in debt, mostly from gambling. And Donnelly? He was living way beyond his means, desperately trying to keep up with his wealthier pals. I'd heard more than enough. I marched into the living room, and both guys immediately swiveled their heads in my direction. Dante, who had been hovering over a laptop, straightened up and gave me a respectful nod. Mrs. Vital. Teresa, Elisio said. his voice taking on a softer edge as his eyes lingered on me. You ought to be resting. I've had plenty of rest. I tightened the belt on my robe, self-conscious about my bare legs and the fact that my hair was still damp. What exactly are you plotting, Alizio? Dante shot a glance between us, then gathered up his papers. I'll wait downstairs. As soon as the door clicked shut behind him, Alizio moved toward me, his steps measured, as if he were approaching a skittish animal. He didn't want to spook me. You overheard? It was more of a statement than a question. Yes, I did. Then you're aware that I'm handling the situation. The video's been taken down. Those lowlifes won't be giving you any more trouble. Brought in, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. What does that actually entail? His jaw tightened, the muscle flickering beneath his skin. It means they're about to get a crash course in respect. By scaring them half to death? By resorting to violence? Would you honestly prefer that I sit back and do nothing? A sharp, dangerous edge crept into his tone. Should I let them keep circulating those videos? Allow other guys to see it and think they can get away with treating you like that? I crossed my arms defensively over my chest, caught in a tug-of-war between the part of me that was sickened by the thought of what Alizio might be planning and the smaller, darker part that craved to see those punks suffer the consequences of their cruelty. There's got to be a compromise, I finally said, my voice wavering slightly. Something that doesn't involve. I trailed off, unable to bring myself to voice my deepest fears. Alizio's face remained a mask, betraying nothing. But I'd become adept at spotting the subtle signals that gave away his true feelings. The almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes, the slight flexing of his jaw. What would you have me do, Teresa? He asked, his voice deceptively gentle. Dial 911? File a harassment claim that'll gather dust in some forgotten file? Those jackasses think they can use people for their own amusement without any repercussions. I honestly don't know, I admitted, my shoulders slumping. But this whole bringing them in thing, whatever it means, it feels incredibly extreme. He took another step closer, his fingertips brushing against my cheek with a tenderness that stood in stark contrast to the cold, hard glint in his eyes. You didn't see what I saw in that video. The leering faces, the vile comments swirling beneath it, the way they were looking at you. I lived through it, Alizio. I was right there. Remember? Then you know they're getting exactly what they deserve. I recoiled from his touch, a wave of frustration washing over me. This is exactly the reason I wanted to keep my personal life separate from your world. The instant they collide, it's always like this. I made a sweeping gesture between us. Suddenly, I'm not just Teresa, the girl who serves tables. I'm Mrs. Vital. And anyone who so much as looks at me the wrong way is going to feel the full force of your vengeance. Something flickered in his gaze, a shadow of hurt, or perhaps anger. You are Mrs. Vital, my wife, the most precious person in my entire life. Did you honestly think that was just a fancy title? That I'd stand idly by while you were being publicly humiliated? Of course not. But there's a massive gulf between protecting me and whatever sinister scheme you and Dante have cooked up. Alizio ran a frustrated hand through his dark, impeccably styled hair, a rare glimpse of his inner turmoil. Those guys deliberately targeted someone they assumed was vulnerable, someone without any power. They were convinced they could get away with their disgusting behavior. They were dead wrong. I recognized that look in his eyes, that quiet, unshakable resolve that was impervious to any argument. 9 months wasn't nearly enough time to uncover all of Alizio's closely guarded secrets, to fully comprehend the intricate web of his business dealings, but it was more than enough to understand that once he'd made up his mind, there was no changing it. Will you at least tell me what you're planning to do with them? I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. He scrutinized me for what felt like an eternity. Would knowing the nitty-gritty details make you feel better or worse? His question hung in the air between us, and I realized with a sinking heart that he was right. Deep down, I didn't actually want to know. Just like so many other aspects of Alizio's shadowy existence, I preferred to remain in the comfortable fog of partial ignorance. Just promise me that nobody ends up dead because of some idiotic video, I finally managed to say. A hint of a smile touched the corners of his mouth, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I already gave you my word that there would be no permanent physical harm. And I am a man of my word, Teresa. The way he emphasized the word permanent didn't escape my notice, but I let it slide. There was an invisible line that ran through the heart of our relationship, a boundary I rarely dared to cross when it came to his clandestine business affairs. It was part of our unspoken pact. He kept that murky world at a distance from me, and in return, I refrained from asking the kind of questions I didn't really want the answers to. I have to go to work today, I said, abruptly changing the subject. My shift starts at noon. Alisio's face hardened in an instant. No, I don't think so. You're not going back to Lorenzo's. Not today, not ever. I stared at him, disbelief quickly morphing into outrage. You can't just make a decision like that for me. Yes, I can, and I just did. His tone was final, leaving no room for argument. Those men know where you work. And even though the video's been taken down, who knows how many people saw it before it disappeared. I'm not going to take any chances with your safety. My safety? I let out a short, humorless laugh. They're just a bunch of obnoxious, immature jerks. Alisio, not cold-blooded murderers. You'd be shocked at how easily one can turn into the other. He reached out and gently took my hands in his touch surprisingly tender given the palpable tension radiating from every pore. Teresa, please, just for once, let me protect you without you fighting me every step of the way. By forcing me to abandon my job, the only thing I've specifically asked to keep for myself? His eyes searched mine, probing for any sign of understanding. Is it honestly worth all of this? The humiliation, the being filmed against your will, the constant harassment, working until your feet are throbbing and your back screaming in pain, all for what? A handful of measly tips that barely cover the cost of your bus fare home? It's not about the money, damn it, I said, wrenching my hands away from his grasp. It's about holding on to something that's mine, something that feels normal. Normal. He practically spat the word. You genuinely think those animals treated you normally? You believe that Marco, who works you like a dog and always sides with the abusive customers, is giving you some kind of normal experience? I winced, the truth of his words hitting me like a physical blow. It's not always that bad, is it? Alisio's voice softened, losing some of its harshness. How many times have you come home with horror stories about customers who made disgusting, inappropriate comments? How many times have you been forced to work back-to-back double shifts because Marco knows that you're too soft-hearted to refuse? That job isn't giving you independence, Teresa. It's turned you into a prisoner. His cutting words struck a nerve I hadn't even realized was exposed. How many countless nights had I dragged myself home, my feet swollen and throbbing, my back screaming in agony, my dignity ripped to shreds. How many times had I been forced to swallow my pride and bite my tongue when customers treated me as if I were less than human? But even so, the very thought of giving it all up, of surrendering this last fragile connection to the woman I was before I met Alisio, filled me with an inexplicable, gut-wrenching panic. I need to take a shower, I mumbled abruptly, turning my back on him. I'm going to be late. I could feel his intense gaze boring into the back of my head as I retreated to the sanctuary of the bathroom, quietly but firmly closing the door between us. As the scalding water cascaded over my body, I finally let the tears flow freely. Tears of frustration, tears of confusion, and a profound, unsettling grief for a life that I was slowly outgrowing, but couldn't seem to muster the courage to let go of. By the time I emerged from the bathroom, dressed in my rumpled, slightly stained uniform from the previous night, Alisio had vanished. A hastily scribbled note was lying on the kitchen counter. Car is waiting downstairs. We'll discuss everything tonight. I crumpled the note in my fist, feeling a confusing mix of relief and disappointment that he hadn't stayed to continue our argument. Just as promised, the sleek, black Bentley was idling at the curb outside, with Salvatore standing stiffly at attention beside it. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Vital," he said formally, as he opened the rear door for me. "It's just Teresa at work, remember?" I reminded him as I slid into the luxurious leather interior. Salvatore's expression remained as impassive and unreadable as ever as he closed the door with a soft click. A moment later, he was behind the wheel, smoothly pulling the car into the flow of traffic. "Heading to Lorenzo's, then?" he asked, his dark eyes meeting mine briefly in the rearview mirror. I hesitated, Alizio's sharp words echoing in my head. "It's your cage." "Yes?" I said at last, my voice sounding strangely small and uncertain, even to my own ears. "Please." The entire drive passed in tense, uncomfortable silence. I knew that Salvatore was Alizio's eyes and ears, constantly feeding him information about my every move. Where he took me, what time he dropped me off, whether I looked happy, sad, angry, or exhausted. It was all part of the invisible web of surveillance that perpetually surrounded me, a web that I usually chose to ignore for my own sanity. But as we drew closer to Lorenzo's, I felt a peculiar tightness in my chest, a strange sense of foreboding. The restaurant seemed different somehow, smaller and shabbier than I remembered it. Or perhaps it was me who had changed, seeing it now through Alizio's jaded eyes. "I'll wait here," Salvatore announced as he expertly maneuvered the Bentley to a stop at the curb. "That's really not necessary. My shift doesn't end until 8. His face remained utterly blank, giving nothing away. But I nodded anyway. "Agreed. Then be ready at 9 o'clock. Wear something appropriate." "Appropriate for what?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "For meeting the men who thought they could humiliate Alizio Vital's wife with impunity." The implication was clear. Tonight I wouldn't be Teresa the waitress. I would be Mrs. Vital in every sense of the title. "I should go home and change," I said, suddenly aware of my shabby uniform. Alizio shook his head. "I have meetings until evening. You'll stay here where I know you're safe." "Here." I glanced around the office. "There's a suite through that door." He nodded toward the second door I'd noticed in the hallway. "Everything you need is there. Clothes, toiletries, rest. I'll join you when I'm finished." I shouldn't have been surprised. Of course, Alizio would have prepared for every contingency, including the possibility of me needing to stay at the club. "Do you often have women staying in your private suite?" I asked, a hint of jealousy coloring my tone despite myself. Alizio's expression darkened. "Only you, Teresa, ever." His possessiveness should have bothered me once. Now it felt like an anchor in a shifting sea. "I believe you." He crossed to a sideboard and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass. "I have one more meeting. Make yourself comfortable. Anything you want, just call down to the staff." I nodded, turning to leave, but he caught my wrist, pulling me back against his chest. His kiss was fierce, claiming, a physical manifestation of the possessiveness I'd come to understand was as much a part of him as his ruthless business acumen, or his unexpected tenderness. 9 months, he murmured against my lips. 9 months I've watched you exhaust yourself at that restaurant, coming home with aching feet and wounded pride. 9 months I've honored your wish to keep your independence. His fingers threaded through my hair, cradling my head. "But you were never meant for that life, Teresa. You were meant for this, for me." The intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. "I know that now." He released me reluctantly, the business mask sliding back into place. I nodded, slipping through the door to the private suite. Inside, I found a space that was unmistakably designed with me in mind. Soft creams and blues, a plush bed with linens I recognized from our home, even framed photographs of us on the nightstand. A large closet revealed dresses in my size, shoes arranged neatly below. In the bathroom, I found my preferred brand of shampoo, my favorite perfume. Alizio had created this space for me long before today, preparing for the moment when I would finally step fully into his world. The realization both unnerved and touched me. How well he knew me, perhaps better than I knew myself. I showered, washing away the last traces of Lorenzo's, and wrapped myself in a silk robe I found hanging on the bathroom door. As I stretched out on the bed, exhaustion washed over me. Not just physical tiredness, but the emotional fatigue of maintaining two separate lives for so long. As sleep claimed me, I wondered what version of myself would emerge tonight. Not Teresa, the waitress, certainly, but perhaps not quite the carefully shielded Mrs. Vital, either someone new, someone stronger, someone who would stand beside Eliseo as he delivered justice to those who had wronged me and not look away. I woke to the sensation of fingers gently tracing the curve of my cheek. Opening my eyes, I found Eliseo seated on the edge of the bed, his tie loosened, jacket discarded. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, bathing everything in golden light. "What time is it?" I asked, my voice husky with sleep. "Just after 7. He brushed a strand of hair from my face. "You needed the rest." I sat up, clutching the silk robe around me. "Your meeting's concluded?" His eyes traveled over me with quiet appreciation. "I've had dinner sent up. You should eat before tonight." The mention of tonight sent a flutter of nerves through my stomach. I'd been so certain in my demand to witness what happened to the 3 men. But now, in the fading light of evening, doubt crept in. "Having second thoughts?" Eliseo asked, reading my expression with his usual uncanny accuracy. "No," I said quickly, then amended. "Maybe, I don't know what to expect." He stood, moving to a covered tray on a nearby table. "Expect justice. Nothing more, nothing less." He lifted the silver dome, revealing a beautifully plated meal of seared scallops and risotto, my favorite. "Come eat." I joined him at the small table, grateful for his thoughtfulness, even as anxiety curled in my chest. "Will they be frightened?" "Yes." He poured wine into a crystal glass, offering it to me. "That's the point." I took a sip, letting the rich Barolo coat my tongue. "Will they be hurt?" Eliseo's expression remained carefully neutral. "That depends on them, on their cooperation, their remorse." He studied me over the rim of his own glass. "Does that disturb you?" I considered the question honestly. It should. I know it should. But when I think about what they did, how they made me feel, I broke off, surprised by the anger rising in me. "A part of me wants them to suffer. That's natural," Eliseo said, his voice gentle. "They humiliated you, treated you as less than human. The desire for retribution is as old as humanity itself." "But it's not right," I argued, more with myself than with him. "Says who?" He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "The law? The same law that would have done nothing if you'd reported them? The same law that lets men like Jason Miller walk free because his father's money shields him from consequences?" I had no answer for that. In the 9 months since meeting Eliseo, I'd come to understand that his moral code, while different from what society deemed acceptable, had its own internal logic. He valued loyalty above all, protected those under his care with ferocious dedication, and believed that actions should have proportionate consequences. "Eat," he encouraged, gesturing to my untouched food. "You'll need your strength." I obeyed, finding that despite my anxiety, I was ravenous. We ate in comfortable silence, the familiarity of sharing a meal with Eliseo calming me in a way nothing else could. When we finished, he checked his watch. "It's time to get ready," he said, rising. "I've selected something for you to wear." He led me to the closet, withdrawing a garment bag I hadn't noticed earlier. Inside was a dress I'd never seen before. Deep burgundy, elegantly cut with a high neck and long sleeves, conservative, yet unmistakably expensive. "It's beautiful," I said, running my fingers over the fine fabric. "It's armor," Eliseo replied. "Tonight you need to look like exactly who you are, my wife. Not a waitress they can mock with impunity." I understood then the dress, the jewelry he produced next, a diamond pendant and matching earrings. They weren't just adornments. They were symbols of my position, of the protection I carried by being Eliseo Vital's wife. He left me to dress, returning when I called for him to zip the back of the gown. His fingers lingered at the nape of my neck, a gentle caress that belied the tension I felt radiating from him. "Second thoughts?" I echoed his earlier question. "No." His eyes met mine in the mirror, But I want you to understand what happens tonight can't be undone. Once you see the side of my world of me, we cross a line. I turned to face him, taking in his immaculate appearance. He'd changed into a fresh suit, black as midnight, with a tie that matched my dress perfectly. His hair was combed back, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. He looked dangerous, powerful, every inch the man others feared. "I'm ready," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. His eyes searched mine for a moment before he nodded, apparently satisfied with what he found. "Then let's go." We took his private elevator down to the parking garage where Salvatore waited with the Bentley. The drive was silent, tension building with each passing minute as we left the gleaming downtown buildings behind, heading toward the industrial district by the river. The warehouse appeared ordinary from the outside. A nondescript building with no signs or markings, just one of many in the row of similar structures. The only indication of its significance was the two black SUVs parked near the entrance and the men standing guard who straightened as our car approached. Salvatore opened my door, his expression revealing nothing as he helped me out. Alizio placed his hand at the small of my back, a reassuring pressure as we walked toward the entrance. Inside, the warehouse was surprisingly clean. The concrete floor polished, the lighting stark, but even. A large open space contained nothing but 3 chairs positioned several yards apart, each occupied by a man whose hands appeared to be bound behind his back. Dante stood to one side along with 4 other men I recognized from Alizio's security detail. The 3 young men from Lorenzo's looked dramatically different from the cocky customers who had mocked me. Their expensive suits were rumpled, their faces pale with fear. Jason sat rigidly in his chair, jaw clenched in defiance. Gel hair. Tyler couldn't stop nervously shifting, his eyes darting around the room. Patchy beard. Michael had his head bowed, shoulders slumped in defeat. They didn't notice our entrance at first, giving me a moment to steady myself. Alizio's hand tightened slightly at my waist. "Remember our agreement," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "Stay beside me. Speak only when I indicate, and if I tell you to leave, go without question." "I understand," I finished. He nodded once, then straightened to his full height, his presence seeming to fill the cavernous space. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying easily across the room. All 3 heads snapped up, fear evident in their expressions as they registered Alizio's presence. Then, almost in unison, their eyes shifted to me, confusion replacing fear for a brief moment before horrified recognition dawned. "The waitress?" Jason whispered, the blood draining from his face. Alizio guided me forward, his pace unhurried as we approached the center of the room. "Not just a waitress," he corrected, his tone conversational, yet somehow more terrifying for its calm. "My wife, Mrs. Teresa Vital." The name hung in the air and I watched as its significance registered with each of them. Tyler's nervous fidgeting stopped abruptly, his body going completely still. Michael raised his head, eyes wide with dawning terror. Jason's defiance cracked, fear seeping through. "You didn't know," Alizio continued, circling behind them slowly while keeping me at his side. "You thought she was just a server you could mock, film, humiliate online for your amusement. No consequences, no repercussions." He stopped behind Jason's chair, placing his hands on the young man's shoulders. "A grave miscalculation. We didn't," Jason began, his voice cracking. "Silence," Alizio said softly, but with such authority that Jason's mouth snapped shut immediately. "You speak when spoken to." The warehouse fell so quiet I could hear the shallow, panicked breathing of all 3 men. Alizio moved to stand before them, drawing me gently to his side. "My wife believes in second chances," he said, his eyes moving between the 3 terrified faces. "She has asked me to show mercy, to let you make amends for your disrespect." Hope flickered in their expressions, quickly tempered by weariness. "But first," Alizio continued, "I want you to understand exactly what you did, what you participated in." He turned to me, his expression softening marginally. Teresa, would you like to tell them? All eyes turned to me, and for a moment I froze. Then I thought of the humiliation I'd felt, the helplessness as they recorded me, the violation of seeing myself mocked online. You treated me like I wasn't human? I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Like I was an object for your entertainment. You filmed me without consent. You posted it online where thousands of people could see me being humiliated. Michael's head dropped again in shame. Tyler stared at the floor. Only Jason maintained eye contact, though fear had replaced his earlier arrogance. Do you know what that feels like? I continued, finding my courage. To know strangers are laughing at you, to wonder if everyone who looks at you has seen that video, to feel unsafe in your workplace. I'm sorry, Michael mumbled, his voice barely audible. Eliseo moved to stand behind him. Louder. I'm sorry, Michael repeated, his voice breaking. I didn't think. We were just messing around. We didn't know who you were. That's your first mistake, Eliseo cut in. Believing it would be acceptable to treat anyone that way, regardless of who they are. His eyes narrowed. But yes, your second mistake was choosing my wife as your target. What are you going to do to us? Tyler asked, terror evident in his voice. Eliseo regarded him coldly. That depends on you, on whether you're genuinely remorseful, on whether you're willing to make proper amends. Anything, Tyler said quickly. Please, Mr. Vital, I'll do anything. Will you? Eliseo turned to Jason, who had remained silent. And you? Are you prepared to make amends for disrespecting my wife? Jason swallowed hard, his earlier defiance evaporating under Eliseo's steady gaze. Yes, he whispered. Good. Eliseo nodded to Dante, who approached with a laptop. Then here's what happens next. Each of you will make a substantial donation to the Service Workers' Rights Fund. For you, Jason, given your family's resources, that amount is $250,000. Jason's eyes widened. Would you prefer an alternative arrangement? Eliseo asked softly. No, I'll pay. I'll pay right now. Tyler, your contribution will be $75,000. Tyler nodded frantically. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And Michael, $50,000. Michael looked up, relief washing over his face. Yes, of course. Additionally, Eliseo continued, you will each post public apologies on your social media accounts, acknowledging your behavior and its consequences. The wording will be provided to you. Is that it? Jason asked, then quickly added, I mean, yes, absolutely. Eliseo's expression remained impassive. Almost. One final condition. He turned to me, his eyes softening slightly. Teresa, is there anything specific you would like from these men? I hadn't expected this, the opportunity to name my own terms. I looked at the three frightened faces before me, men who had towered over me at Lorenzo's, but now seemed small and pathetic. What did I want from them? I want you to work in service for 1 month, I said finally. Each of you waiting tables, cleaning dishes, whatever the hardest job is, and I want proof that you did it. Surprise flickered across Eliseo's face, followed by something like pride. An excellent suggestion. Dante will arrange appropriate placements. You will report daily, complete your shifts without complaint, and treat every colleague and customer with respect. Relief washed over their faces. Clearly, they had expected much worse. If any of these conditions are not met, Eliseo added, his voice hardening, we will have another conversation, one far less pleasant. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable in its clarity. Do we understand each other? Eliseo asked. All three nodded vigorously. Verbal answers, he commanded. Yes, sir, they chorused. Good. He turned to Dante. Process the donations now, then release them one at a time, 30 minutes apart. Different drivers, different routes. Yes, boss, Dante replied, moving toward Jason first with the laptop. Eliseo placed his hand on the small of my back again, guiding me toward the exit. We're finished here. As we walked away, I glanced back at the three men who had tormented me just 24 hours earlier. They looked broken, humbled, utterly transformed by fear and the reality of consequences. I should have felt satisfaction, perhaps even vindication. Instead, I felt something more complex, a mixture of relief, closure, and a strange kind of power I'd never experienced before. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed cheeks. Alizio studied me as Salvatore held the car door. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. I considered the question, searching my feelings honestly. "No," I said finally, "but I don't think I need to see anything like that again." A smile touched his lips. One glimpse behind the curtain was enough. More than enough. I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. "Thank you for letting me choose their punishment, the service work. It was inspired," he said, helping me into the car. "Fitting. Just." As Salvatore drove us back toward the city, I leaned against Alizio's shoulder, feeling the tension of the past 24 hours slowly dissipate. The humiliation of Lorenzo's, the argument this morning, the confrontation at the warehouse. It all seemed to recede, leaving only the certainty that I had finally stopped living between worlds. "What now?" I asked as we watched the city lights approach. Alizio's arm tightened around me. "Whatever you want, Teresa. You don't have to work at Lorenzo's, but that doesn't mean you can't find something that's yours, something worthy of your talents." I considered this, the freedom of possibilities stretching before me. I've always wanted to finish my degree, maybe open a small bookshop someday. "Then that's what you'll do," he said simply, as if making it so required nothing more than his word. Perhaps in his world it didn't. As we pulled up to our building, the doorman rushing to open my door, I realized that the woman who had left this morning, trapped between worlds, clinging desperately to a false independence, was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who understood that true freedom wasn't found in waiting tables or taking buses in the rain. It was found in accepting who I was, who I loved, and the life we would build together, one that didn't require me to be less than I could be. Alizio helped me from the car, his hand warm and steady in mine as we walked into the lobby. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adjustments to this life I was fully embracing. But tonight, as the elevator carried us toward our penthouse, I felt only certainty. I was Teresa Vital, not a waitress playing at Independence, not a wife hiding from her husband's world. Just me, finally whole.